It wasn't a mistake. When Amy Winehouse stood frozen on that stage in front of thousands, the microphone trembling in her tattooed hand, every person in that venue knew something had shattered. Her eyes locked onto someone in the third row, and in that moment, the lyrics she'd sung 1,000 times before simply vanished from her mind. But this wasn't about memory. This was about something far more human, far more devastating. What happened next would prove that some moments transcend music, transcend performance, and reach straight into the raw core of what it means to be alive and broken and somehow still standing. The Hammersmith Apollo was packed that October evening. The air thick with anticipation, cigarette smoke still clinging to the velvet curtains from decades of performances. Amy Winehouse was scheduled to perform her entire Back to Black album, a sold-out show that had fans queuing since dawn. In the third row, seat 23, sat a woman named Sarah Mitchell. 42 years old. Terminal cancer. Stage 4. Her daughter had bought the tickets 6 months earlier, back when Sarah could still walk without assistance, back when hope wasn't just a word people said to fill uncomfortable silences. Sarah had listened to Back to Black during every chemotherapy session. The album had become her companion through the worst moments, Amy's voice somehow understanding the particular shade of grief that comes with watching your own body betray you. Tonight was supposed to be a gift, a final memory before the inevitable. Her daughter held her hand as the lights dimmed. But nobody in that venue, not even Sarah herself, could have predicted what Amy Winehouse was about to do. Amy walked onto stage at 9:47 p.m. The crowd erupted. She wore her signature beehive, winged eyeliner sharp enough to cut, a black dress that hung on her tiny frame like it was designed for someone twice her size. She looked fragile and fierce all at once, the way she always did. The band started the opening notes of Rehab, and Amy's voice cut through the room like broken glass that somehow still sparkles. She was 3 songs in when it happened. Back to Black started playing. The song that had defined her, that had broken her, that had made her immortal even while she was still breathing. Amy sang the first verse perfectly, her voice raw and aching. Then, halfway through the second verse, her eyes swept across the crowd. Standard performer behavior. Connecting with the audience. But then her gaze stopped. Fixed. Locked onto row 3, seat 23. Sarah Mitchell was crying. Not the gentle tears of someone moved by music. These were the tears of someone drowning, someone who'd been holding everything together for months and had finally found a moment where it was safe to fall apart. Her daughter's arm was around her shoulders. Sarah's hands were pressed against her chest, like she was trying to physically hold her heart inside her body. Amy Winehouse stopped singing. Mid-word. The band continued for 2 more bars before the musical director realized something was wrong and signaled them to stop. The Hammersmith Apollo, filled with 3,000 people, went completely silent. Amy stood there, microphone at her side, staring into the crowd. Her chest was rising and falling rapidly. Someone in the audience shouted, "You okay, Amy?" She didn't respond. Didn't acknowledge the question. Her eyes stayed fixed on Sarah Mitchell. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Security guards near the stage exchanged glances, unsure whether to intervene. Amy's band members looked at each other, confused. Then Amy did something nobody expected. She walked to the edge of the stage and sat down, legs dangling over the side, like she was sitting on a dock instead of performing for thousands of people. "What's your name?" Amy's voice came through the microphone, but she wasn't performing now. She was just talking. The question was directed at Sarah. Sarah's daughter leaned in, whispered something. Sarah shook her head, tried to wave Amy off, clearly embarrassed by the attention. But Amy didn't move. She just sat there, waiting. Patient in a way that felt completely at odds with her public image. "Sarah," the daughter finally called out, her voice cracking. "Sarah," Amy repeated, like she was tasting the name. "This song is for people who understand darkness. You understand it, don't you?" Sarah nodded. Tears streaming down her face. Subscribe now because what Amy did next changed everything about that night, and nobody who was there ever forgot it. Amy stood up, but instead of returning to center stage, she walked down the steps that led to the audience. Security immediately moved toward her, but she waved them off with an irritation that was pure Amy Winehouse. She walked straight to row 3. The crowd parted like water. When she reached Sarah's seat, Amy knelt down in the aisle, her dress pooling around her knees, looking up at this woman she'd never met but somehow recognized. "How long?" Amy asked quietly, though the microphone still caught it, broadcasting this private moment to everyone. 3 months, Sarah's daughter answered when her mother couldn't. "Maybe less." Amy reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled pack of cigarettes. She took one out, put it between her lips, then seemed to remember where she was and laughed. A real laugh, not a performance. She held the unlit cigarette out to Sarah instead. "Can't smoke in here anymore," Amy said. "But when you get home, light this one. And know that somebody out there understood." Sarah took the cigarette with shaking hands. Amy reached up and took Sarah's face in both hands, her rings cold against Sarah's skin. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Two women who understood what it meant to be consumed by something bigger than yourself, whether that something was disease or addiction or just the unbearable weight of being human. "You're not alone," Amy whispered, but the microphone was close enough to catch it. "None of us are. We're all just trying to make it through the next moment." Then Amy did something that made the entire venue hold its collective breath. She started singing, "Back to Black," again, right there in the aisle, kneeling on the floor, her voice unadorned by the sound system. Just raw voice, filling that small space between two people who'd found each other in the dark. The band caught on after the first line and joined in softly. But this wasn't a performance anymore. This was something else. Something sacred. Sarah was sobbing now, but so was her daughter, and so were the people in the rows around them, and so were people 50 rows back who could barely see what was happening but could feel it reverberating through the room like an earthquake. But here's the part nobody expected, the part that changed everything about how people understood Amy Winehouse. When Amy finished the song, she stood up, helped Sarah stand too, and walked her back toward the stage. Sarah's daughter followed, confused but trusting. Amy brought them both onto the stage. The crowd was completely silent now, watching something unfold that felt more important than any concert. Amy took off one of her rings, a silver band she'd worn for years, and pressed it into Sarah's palm. "Keep this," Amy said. "When it gets hard, and it will get hard, look at this and remember that your pain is real, your fear is valid, but you are not defined by what's destroying you. You're defined by the fact that you're still here, still fighting, still capable of feeling music move through you." Sarah couldn't speak. She just held the ring and nodded, tears falling onto the stage. Amy turned to Sarah's daughter. "Take care of her. But also take care of yourself. The people left behind carry the heaviest weight." Amy's voice cracked on those last words, and everyone who knew anything about Amy Winehouse's history knew she wasn't just talking about Sarah and her daughter anymore. Amy helped them back to their seats, then returned to center stage. She picked up her microphone, and for a moment, just stood there, collecting herself. When she finally spoke, her voice was rough with emotion. "This is for everyone who's fighting something nobody else can see. This is for everyone who wakes up and chooses to keep going even when going seems impossible. This is for everyone who finds themselves in the dark and has to learn to make friends with it because it's not going anywhere." She launched into "Love is a losing game." And this time when she sang, it was different. More vulnerable. More present. Like something had cracked open in her that had been sealed shut for too long. The entire venue swayed together, 3,000 people unified by the recognition that they were witnessing something that transcended entertainment. This was communion. This was truth. This was what happens when the mask slips and we remember we're all just fragile creatures trying to make sense of an often senseless world. After the concert, Amy didn't do her usual quick exit. She stayed. She went to Sarah's seat again, sat with her for 20 minutes while the venue slowly emptied. They talked about everything and nothing. About music and mortality, about addiction and illness, about the ways we cope and the ways we fall apart. Security tried to rush Amy several times, but she refused to move. This moment mattered more than whatever was scheduled next. When Amy finally left, she hugged Sarah like they were old friends, like they'd known each other their entire lives. Maybe in some way they had. Maybe pain recognizes pain across any distance. Sarah Mitchell died 5 weeks later. But her daughter later told reporters that her mother spent those final weeks different than before. Lighter somehow. She wore Amy's ring every day. She listened to Back to Black, not as a companion to suffering but as a reminder that even in the darkest moments, connection is possible. Human recognition is possible. Being truly seen is possible. Share this story with someone who needs to remember they're not alone. Subscribe because these are the moments that matter. The night at Hammersmith Apollo became legendary. Not because of the musical performance, though that was extraordinary, but because of what Amy Winehouse showed everyone in that venue, that vulnerability isn't weakness, that stopping the show for a suffering person isn't unprofessional, it's the most professional thing a human being can do. That the protocol matters less than the person. That the performance matters less than the presence. Amy never publicly discussed that night in detail. When asked about it in interviews, she'd shrug and say, she needed to know someone saw her. We all need that sometimes. But those who were close to Amy said something shifted after that concert. She started being more open about her own struggles. She started talking more honestly about addiction, about pain, about the fact that fame doesn't protect you from being human and all the complications that come with it. The cigarette Amy gave Sarah was never lit. Sarah's daughter kept it, along with the ring, in a small box. After Sarah died, the daughter reached out to Amy's management and asked if she could return the ring. Amy's response was immediate and clear. That ring belonged to Sarah. Now it belongs to you. Keep it. Pass it on when someone needs it more than you do. That's how these things work. 3 years after that night, when Amy Winehouse herself passed away, Sarah's daughter attended the memorial. She wore the ring. She brought the unlit cigarette. She stood among thousands of mourners and remembered that night when Amy proved that her greatest performance wasn't any song she recorded. It was the moment she stepped off the stage and into someone else's pain, saying through her actions what words could never quite capture. I see you. Your suffering matters. You are not invisible. The legacy of Amy Winehouse is complicated, filled with tragedy and triumph, addiction and artistry. But for Sarah Mitchell's daughter, for the 3,000 people in Hammersmith Apollo that October night, and for everyone who's heard this story since, the legacy is simple. Amy understood that being human means recognizing the humanity in others. That sometimes the most important thing you can do is stop, look someone in the eye, and say, you're not alone. That cigarette still sits in a box, unlit, a symbol of a promise kept. The ring has been passed on 3 times now, each time to someone fighting their own invisible war. And somewhere, in the way these objects move through the world, carrying their weight of memory and meaning, Amy Winehouse continues to perform. Not on stage, but in the small, sacred moments when one person reaches out to another and says, without words, I understand. I see you. You matter. Amy didn't forget her lyrics that night. She remembered something more important, that being human matters more than being perfect. And in that moment, she gave Sarah something no medicine could provide, hope wrapped in understanding. Sometimes the greatest performances happen when we stop performing altogether.